Today's project, we're going to do a little drywall work. This is in my garage, and this area here was home to some closets that I pulled out. And I'm going to show you how to fix some drywall. We'll focus on this section here. Got a couple examples. Here's a small hole that needs to be filled, slightly elongated, and a larger hole that has a little bit of tear out. This has some pretty significant tear out where the paper is actually removed. This outlet box here, we're going to address this cutout. And then this is a fairly typical example when you're prying on drywall and removing nails. If you don't have it supported correctly, you get pushed through. So we'll take a look at all these examples and how to fix them. Okay, before you do anything, you're going to want to scrape the wall. So you got to grab a good scraper. It doesn't have to be pretty. This has just got a nice, smooth, straight edge on it. And it's got a little bit of a bevel on it. And what we're going to do is we're going to knock down all the stuff on the wall that's able to get knocked down. So if you see here, you got like some junk on the wall. You're just gonna go ahead and just kind of scrape around that, get any dead bugs and cobwebs off of here. We'll come back and wash and prep everything. When you get to the paper, you don't want to just gouge into it and rip it. You can kind of move around it and knock down high spots. We'll remove this plate in a second. Just go around and just make sure everything is smooth-ish. Helps to wear some dirty clothes, and what I do is I take my knife and then I just rub it on my leg to get my knife clean again. Go around the wall, take off all those chunkies, and that's kind of the first step. Okay, next step is a little bit of prep. So I took the wall plate off, and then I got a couple of drywall screws, and I drove 2 of them into the loose flap. And when we go to reseal this, we're actually going to grab these 2 screws and we're gonna pull it so that it actually closes this back up. So, and again, just going over, making sure everything that's loose is knocked off. Okay, next step, you're just gonna get a bucket of water and a sponge. Make sure your sponge is damp but not sopping wet, and just kind of wipe down the wall where you're gonna mud and get everything that you want mud to stick to wet. Kind of acts like concrete a little bit. If you want it to stick, it's got to be wet. And then we're going to kind of wring this out. And any dirt, like see all that dirt on there? We already cleaned up off here, but you're going to take and wipe all that junk. Get it off the wall. You're not soaking the wall, you're just getting it wet. And that's it. So for drywall compound, I use this pre-mixed stuff for smaller jobs. It doesn't make sense to get a bag and start mixing it. I picked up a new one today because I wasn't sure. My old one I've had probably since June. So that was 3 months ago from my last project. You can still use this stuff. It looks hard. There's a little bit of oil in there. When you're mixing it, you can add a little water to it and you can sort of reconstitute it. And for patchwork like this is totally fine. You don't have to throw that out. Okay, I'll show you how to reconstitute this compound. So, in putty knife, you can see it's kind of hard. There's a little bit that's not, and then there's some that's kind of dried. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of scrape down in here and pick up everything. Mix it all together, just like batter. That. And the dried chunks on the side, knock them down in there. It's not going to hurt anything. Again, this is just a patch job. We're going to do finish coating and painting and priming and all that. Plenty of opportunities to rework it. No reason to waste this and just wash it down your drain, throw it in the landfill. Look at that. We can work with that. That was garbage 30 seconds ago, a minute ago. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit more with 2 hands. If it's not coming back together, all I do is just like adding, flour to your cake batter. Just get a little water. You can even just dip your knife in there, get a little water, start mixing it until you get a good consistency. Okay, scooped out my compound here, and just want to show you that it did come out of this bucket. Didn't use stuff. And you can see all the chunks and the air that's in here. Now again, we're doing patchwork, we're not doing finish troweling, but you can still work with this. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna reach my bucket, just my hand, my finger's wet, and I'm just gonna drip a little water in there, make a little pool, and then watch this, you know, mix this together. Hard to do one hand. Got my hawk here from my good friend Paul. Still working, Paul. See how it's getting those chunks out of there? Mix it with 2 hands, I'll bring it back. Okay, this is good and mixed. I'm gonna take a smaller knife that's a little bit more flexible. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take our compound that we reconstituted. Look how nice and smooth that is. Wall's still wet, right in that joint there. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna push it inside the wall. Get it in where you ripped it because you used a pry bar and you forced it. And you shouldn't have forced it, but you did that anyways because you're in a rush and you were trying to get it done. And now look what you did. You gotta do it all over again. Okay, so all I did is I just filled the hole. Now we're gonna pry this sucker back closed. Okay, so the 2 screws I put in, make one of these. This is just a door shim. I got 1 screw going into the drywall and then 2 that are kind of making a little bit of a standoff. So what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna pull on these screws. See how it oozes out that drywall. And then I'm gonna remove this one because this is the furthest one away from where it broke. And then I'm gonna screw this into it and then have it stand off the wall. But before that, I'm gonna scrape all this back off. Okay, here I got it ready to be installed. And if you look behind here, see the 2 heads of the screw? They're on the drywall, and then the 3rd screw is going into that flap that I'm trying to pull out. And then you just take your screwdriver, and all you're doing is as you tighten this, it pulls that flap closed. And that's it. You let that sucker dry. I'll go ahead and, you know, clean up this a little bit better so I don't have so much sanding to do on my next coat. I mean, it's okay for this because again, this was a pretty significant patch. Pushed a pry bar right through the wall, so we'll let that dry. That's probably gonna need to dry overnight. Not much more I'm gonna be able to do today. It's about 4 in the afternoon. So that can sit overnight. For the rest of these, it's much easier. So again, wall's still wet, you know, from when I applied it. So anything smaller than your finger, just fill it. Don't think about it, just fill it. Overfill it a little bit. See that blister there? If you pop that blister, just make sure you overfill it. This one here has got some paper sticking out. See with my hand? So this is always gonna show through on your paper, or through the mud, is always gonna show through. So what you wanna do is get your fingers, rip all that junk out of there. It's nice and wet now, so it tears off easy. When you can run your finger over it and you don't see it flapping around anymore, you can mud it. I got a little bit more I gotta take off. Helps to have fingernails or scrape it. See that? All that all sticks in your mud and then it sticks through it. Okay, that's good there. Get some mud and I'm pressing it inside that hole now. Right where that screw was. Press it down in there. Try and fill that hole. And you notice when I wipe it, you don't see any of those little tatters anymore. If I didn't pull those out, those would show. I'll give you an example. There's another one. I didn't do anything to this one. See those tatters? Look at that. Every time I wipe it, that little brown thing pokes up. It's like an ingrown hair. There's nothing you can do about it. Once you get it wet, once you can't get it, push it into the wall. Just like that. Take your knife, just shove it in there. Look at that. It's not sticking through anymore. Got a little air bubble. It's because I'm wiping it fast, but that tatter's gone. Okay, so we got all 3 of those taken care of. Last one here. This is a big chunk. This is requiring a little bit more science behind it. So the paper is pulled away from the gypsum. The gypsum's intact, the paper is not intact. So what do? We have to wet the paper. So we already washed the wall. We have to wet the paper where we want it to stick. We have to wet the gypsum where we want the drywall compound to stick, and then close it. Close it like a flap of skin. So what we're gonna do, take our hands, get a little water, and just rub it in. Just rub the water right in. And you're gonna knock out anything that's loose. Get a little more water. Just rub it in. Get it right in that hole. And you can see it's got a little more pliability to it. Before it was kind of, it sprung weight back. Now it's kind of soft. Still using my hand. Just grab a little drywall compound and just smear it in there. It doesn't have to look pretty, because again, this is a rough cut. Smear it in there, fill it up. And you notice as I'm pushing it in there, it's getting all those air pockets out of there. So I got a little more. And then once you got it good and filled, smooth it back over. It's like paper mache. Look at that. That'll hold that there like you wouldn't believe. And then after that dries, you get a little bit of a sinkhole. Just go over it with your skim coat and you're done. There's 4 out of 5. This last one here requires a little bit more special attention. Okay, we lucked out somewhat. The top, right, and bottom of the switch is covered by the wall plate. That's okay. It's only the left side here that we need to worry about. But this method would apply if you had to do the entire switch or just a different side. So what I have here is just regular old painter's tape, and it's taped right to the edge of the box. So here's the edge of the box on the right side. It's taped right on the edge of the box. And what's that doing is that's just creating sort of a dam so that I can put my compound in here and not get it into the switch. So we're gonna do something very similar to what we did here. We're gonna wanna get the back of this wet, and what we're gonna do is back butter. So we're gonna try and force down in there, force it underneath, force it behind there so that it builds a wall of compound on the side of the drywall and some behind it. You don't need to go on top because this is actually flush to the switch already. You want to get it in and back. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm still using my same compound here. I didn't add any more water, I didn't mix any more, but I'm gonna use my large knife now, and you can see there's still chunks in here. Again, we're just doing rough filling. We're not doing any finishing work, so that's why this is okay. So we're gonna get back in here. The power to this outlet is still on. I'm gonna be using water, so you just have to be a little bit careful. If you're not safe, I'd recommend, shutting the breaker off. So got my hands wet, and all I'm doing is I'm just going behind here and just getting the side of the drywall and behind there just moist. It's not gonna hurt anything. If it gets too wet, let it dry for a little bit. And you can see that moisture line, right? I'm not coming on this surface. I'm just getting that inside wet there. So then I'll take my knife, and I got a little bit of a ridge on it. So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna kind of get it inside and back butter it. Back butter it so that it fills that hole like that. See how it fills that hole? And you're just gonna keep working that until it's even. Okay, so here's the finished product, and what you're looking for is the evenness of the gap. So use this as a reference because you know the plate's gonna cover that, and I'm actually a little bit closer. It'll be fine, but it's filled to the point where it's actually flat. So if I was to scrape down this way, there's nothing on this surface. It's all on the side and behind on the drywall. So we're gonna let this section dry, and this section dry, and this section dry overnight because it's thick. But I got a whole lot more that I can fill on this wall tonight and keep going. So I'll give you some progress updates. Okay, so I went around and I started filling, a lot more stuff, had a couple more areas I had to fix. And this is one of the secrets. So this is where we started. It's been, I don't know, maybe a half an hour or so. And you can see that the wall has started to dry up. That means that the moisture in the compound has also started to evaporate somewhat. And it's not soaking wet. And if you can touch it with your finger and it doesn't stick to I got stuff on my finger. Let me use this one. Touch that one. See, it's not sticking. So this is soft enough, pliable enough. You can smooth it out before it dries. That's one of the keys so that you don't have to go and sponge float and sand the whole wall and all that stuff. So you take your knife, relatively clean. See all those ripples there? Watch this. Look at that. The more you work it while it's drying, the less you'll have to work it after it's dried. That's one of the secrets. Now, you can go over the whole thing with a larger knife and it goes even easier, but I like to take a small one and kind of work on the outsides, leaving this as your high spot. Look at that. Smooth it out. And if you get extra stuff you don't want it, wipe it on the wall. Who cares? You're gonna sand it down anyways. Look at how nice and smooth that's looking. That sinkhole, we still have to refill that. So you can even, steal some of it. Look at that. Try to do this through the phone. Remember, this is not even 10 minutes after. You will barely need to touch that before you can paint it. There you go. Any compound you got left over, guess what? Scrape it off. There's no stuff in it. Throw it back in your bucket. You can use it again tomorrow.